Hi, welcome to Modeling Handout. This modeling handout goes along with the Word document that's in Content Reading folder, or is in the Model Content Lectures modeling folder. So this modeling handout PowerPoint goes over all the figures that are in the handout and explains those in more detail, so that you will be able to, at the end of this, practice with one model and then construct your own figure for the final research paper. That is referring to figure 1, which is the modeling figure that I'm asking you to have in your final research paper. So the first example of this is an example of Muslim multicultural awareness. And again, that's a latent variable. And a latent variable means that you have multiple indicators. And so in this figure, it's saying that the three manifest variables below, which means that you know what it means right away. So we know what the Quran means, we know what Muhammad means, and we know what the third one means also right away. So that is a manifest function. So Muslim multicultural awareness can be measured by those three manifest variables. Now there's E1, E2, and E3 on this figure. Those are indicators of errors. In every statistical model there's an error, and unless you're going to grad school you never really have to worry about it, especially not in this class. So it just means that the statistical model has some kind of error in it, and we're not going to really pay attention to it. But notice that there's dotted lines. I really don't care about whether the lines are dotted or solid. I do care when we get to the last figure whether there is a positive or negative relationship. So again, in summary, this figure demonstrates that Muslim multicultural awareness, which is a latent variable, is going to be indicated by those three manifest variables. The second figure is a simple example of an explanatory conceptual path model with two manifest variables. A simple example of the explanatory relationship could link income to education. So the more education you have, the more positive relationship you have to income. Both of those are manifest variables because we typically know how much education you have. So for example, all of you are going to be college graduates in about 6 weeks or so, and so we know that you would have 16 years of education or a bachelor's degree in sociology, and we typically know how much people make in income. Again, on the right hand side you'll see that there's an E, and that E is representing error, so we don't really need to worry about. The solid bold arrow has a positive above it, so that indicates that education is a positive relationship to income. You also notice below the figure you have independent, and independent variables is also known as exogenous, and dependent variables is also endogenous. And so this is just a fancy way to say, again, independent and dependent variables. So this is a model, a simple explanation of one relationship. As you increase education, typically your income increases. We could also have, as you increase in military rank, typically your income increases in this figure, and that would still be a simple example of an explanatory conceptual path model with two manifest variables. The next figure is much more detailed. It's looking at multiculturalism, which is latent, awareness, which is latent, heterogeneity, which is latent, and modern racism, which is latent. And then you'll notice that we have Q1, Q2, Q3, for example, for awareness. So those Qs represents questions that we would ask to indicate or represent what awareness means. So we could say, do you know about the various centers at NIU? Have you visited the centers? Have you attended center events? So those would be three questions that we could ask that examines the awareness that a student might have related to multiculturalism. So again, this multiculturalism is going to be explained by awareness, heterogeneity, and modern racism. And then awareness, for example, or modern racism are all explained by those different questions below it. So Q7, Q8, Q9, etc. You also notice that there are positive and negative relationships between awareness and heterogeneity, and then modern racism and heterogeneity. So these arrows, positive and negative, says that there's a relationship between those three um, latent indicators, and that you're proposing that there's a positive relationship between awareness and a negative relationship between modern racism and the center latent variable. The next figure is getting to more of the figure that you should turn in for your practice and for your final research paper. So we have income, which is a manifest. We typically can indicate who has earned what kind of income. And then we have a positive relationship to awareness. So you see HWI. That's working hypothesis 1. So as income increases, they're predicting that awareness increases. Multicultural awareness is increasing. And then we have HW2, which is working hypothesis 2, which indicates as negative. So as income increases, heterogeneity decreases. And then working hypothesis 3, as income increases, modern racism decreases. So again, you still have Q1, Q2, Q3, which we saw from the last figure. This indicates the questions that are going to represent or conceptualize or measure what kind of awareness we have or what kind of modern racism we have. The important part of this figure is looking at the working hypothesis. So from your sociological knowledge, because you have a lot now, right, you're going to be able to write what the working hypotheses are between the three relationships, and then indicate whether they are negative or positive predicted on your literature review. So we know that the more beer drunk at college parties, the more likely a sexual assault would occur, for example. So that would indicate we would have a positive relationship between drinking and sexual assault. And then in your methods and data section of your draft and final paper, you're going to say things like, as the more a person drinks at a college party, the more the likelihood that sexual assault might occur. That would be a working hypothesis. That came out poorly. I meant it more like, I'm not trying to do rape myths, I'm just trying to give an example. So one of the next to last figures that you have is intervening latent variables. So we see that education, in this example, is latent variable. It should be more of a manifest variable. And income should be a manifest variable. So those figures should be rectangles. And then awareness. And so we have education pointing to income and income pointing to awareness. And we have education pointing to awareness. So intervening variable just means that what it sounds like, it comes in the middle of a relationship. So for example, income may come in between education and awareness, positively or negatively, to influence what people think about awareness. And so we're going to measure in this model intervening variable that has income may influence awareness, or we could have a relationship between education and awareness that doesn't have an intervening variable. So we're going to measure both to see what's going on in this model. So what do you do next? You pick a practice model, which is on Blackboard and the modeling folder for this week. You answer everything in the practice model and you upload it to Blackboard. And then you construct your model for your final research paper, and you can either do it in Word or you can do it in paper pencil and take a picture of it and then upload it to Blackboard.